Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome back to the Scottish Games Network podcast. I'm Brian Baglow. I was absent without leave last week, undertaking a top secret mission as part of a major strategic project to radically reform, transform and revitalise the games industry in Scotland. I can't tell you too much about it unless obviously we send the men in black round to each and every single one of your houses afterwards, but you'll be finding out more about what's been going on in the very near future. Joining me this week, as always, we have our lovely co-hosts. We have Ryan.
Hello.
And we have the very lovely Andrew.
Hello. If we had sent the men in black round to everyone's houses, they couldn't know. Which is the beauty of it, right?
Well, that's it. We may already have done this. You know, this might be the third or fourth time that everybody has had their memories wiped. But, well, you know, it's something to have a chat about at the weekend and really see if you can actually not surface any repressed memories, because we don't want to be responsible for any sort of night terrors regarding alien abductions or, you know, something unspeakable. But, well, let's just hope that it doesn't come to that.
Fair. What an interesting way to start the episode. Okay.
Well, you know, I wasn't here last week. I thought I might as well come back in with a bit of a bang.
Exactly
guys, what have you been up to for the last week? What have you been watching, playing, listening to, reading, and indeed cooking?
Well, I've went back to Daredevil, the Netflix original show, because I only ever watched season 1 of it and then season 1 of Jessica Jones, and never really watched any more. And it wasn't for any other any particular reason. I think I started Daredevil season 2, got about 3-4 episodes in, and then tailed off, and something else came out, and I had to watch that or something. And so we went back to that recently, and I'm thoroughly enjoying it. So I don't know why I ever stopped.
That sounds fantastic. Andrew?
I've been learning about how we're all in a dream world watching the new Adam Curtis documentary on BBC iPlayer. It's definitely informative, maybe not the most positive and uplifting thing to be watching. So that, and also Apex Legends just came out on Switch, so I checked that out yesterday, and at the moment it's a bit of a mess, so we'll see how that goes. But yeah, that's what I've been up to.
Cool and groovy. I binged pretty much the whole of WandaVision on Disney Plus, just to try and get it out the way. And as a long time kind of Twin Peaks fan, I have to say, you know, it promised a lot, and then it was kind of okay. You know, it was certainly something different to the rest of the Marvel oeuvre, but I can't really say that it was massively revealing or completely shocking. I think for anyone who's read the comics and gone through, you know, Marvel over several years, it's not really going to come as a massive shock. And don't get me wrong, it was charming, it was whimsical. They did a lot of really interesting things in terms of different genres within the one series. I think it was the second last one or third last one where they actually pastiche different TV shows, including Modern Family, was really, really good. But overall, it's no Mandalorian.
I think the problem with these shows is, and I think it's going to probably be a sort of reoccurring issue, is I don't think they're going to be doing anything too major in them, because they know that there'll be a lot of people like that maybe don't follow Marvel too closely but only watch the movies, that, you know, like they won't watch the TV shows. So I think I think we're only going to be getting sort of small story points and stuff instead of getting like massive reveals and stuff.
Well, that's interesting, because this touches on transmedia, which is one of the areas that I lecture, you know, harangue and bore people about. But it's a great point. You know, if you're telling stories across multiple channels, multiple media, and, you know, different formats, you have to be really careful that people can follow along, and that if you miss out a certain platform or a certain type of content, that the rest is going to make sense to you. You know, we've got perfect examples with Star Wars. You don't have to have seen anything outside the movies, and you can still follow along. On the flip side of that, you have The Matrix, where it's after one. You know, they spun out into multiple video games, comic books, novelizations, and so on and so forth. And so if you hadn't read any of that, number 2 made very little sense, and number 3 was just a massive pile of dinosaur poo that nobody really wanted to touch, even if you had read all of them. Anyway, sorry, getting sidelined.
Well, the positive thing about in that situation is like in the Animatrix, for instance, there's like 2 or 3 of those that completely divorced from the rest of the Matrix whatsoever. Like you can still enjoy, but it does come at the expense of the Matrix, the main thing, as you say, being a complete incoherent mess.
Well, and this is one of my favourite topics when it comes to TV shows is the bottle episode. You know, a little self-contained episode in the middle of a series that doesn't actually advance the plot. It just does something, you know, completely different. They did a couple of these in Mad Men, which is one of my all-time favourites, and they were superb. Or Breaking Bad, the one where, you know, Walter White's trapped in his lab with a fly, and it just lets the writers play and do something. Do something really, really exciting. And I think there's a whole discussion to be had about doing something like that within a video game, but that's a discussion for another day. So, okay, cool. And before we move on, I have to say, the last week when I've been working, I have mostly been listening to quote the Fast Show, the new Arab Strap album. Oh my God, it's superb. And you know, we have to advocate for more partnerships and more collaborations between Scottish artists across all genres, you know, across all platforms, musicians and authors and game developers and everything, because can you imagine? It's the turning of our bones as an interact. Oh man, it would be superb. But anyway, there's a campaign to start next week.
It's almost like someone should write an article about, you know, Scottish movies that should become video games.
Well volunteered, Ryan. Thank you very much. It's great. Well, you know, you have been sitting twiddling your thumbs since the end of the Playaway Festival.
I think that's exactly it.
This week's news. Okay, it's this week's news. Let's take it seriously. You know, it's good work that we're doing, mostly. So, shall we kick off and jump into our review of the last few days? I'll kick off because I think the first story was mine. So we heard on Monday that sadly the Computer Games Journal, the academic paper that published reviews and content based around the world of video gaming, has closed its doors as a standalone publication after nearly 10 years. Founded by John and Malcolm Sutherland, it was one of the very few publications that was dedicated to video games coming from academic research, and unfortunately they just weren't getting the content in to keep it going. So really sad to hear that that's not going to be out there anymore. I did end up reviewing a couple of papers for them over the years, and I always found the bits and pieces that came across my desk really, really interesting. But so it goes. Hopefully, given all of the activity around game studies and all of the interest across multiple universities, who knows, we might see something new rising from the ashes. And then on following that, we had a request in from our friends at Skills Development Scotland. They are looking at the ways in which COVID-19 has impacted people working within the creative industries, which of course includes each and every one of us. I know that games doesn't tend to think of itself as part of the software scene or indeed the creative world, but we totes are. So they're looking at the ways in which COVID has impacted your work. It's like, have you had more? Have you had less? Have you been furloughed? Have you been laid off? It's all of these kind of things, to let them look at how they can help and how they can use skills, training, upskilling, cross-skilling to really make the creative industry stronger, more resilient, and help us grow and evolve our way out of the current and indeed seemingly endless lockdown. So if you are listening to this, go to the Scottish Games Network website, search for COVID-19 and career. If you can fill in the form, I know they'll appreciate it. Take the survey, no more than 5 minutes, and it will help the team understand more about how they can help you moving forward with your career or indeed your business.
Yeah, and it's the kind of thing that, I mean, obviously Skills Development Scotland are really good at bringing, you know, other people into careers that they maybe didn't even consider as a possibility or something like that. So when we're thinking about stuff like diversity and stuff in games, like it's so important that these people know what the issues are, right?
Yeah,
Totally.
I think it's also just really important to quantify exactly how COVID's affecting like people, especially considering, you know, freelancers and stuff like that. That's quite common within our industry. The idea of them losing out on work or potentially, you know, getting more work because of this. It's definitely important to know exactly how lockdowns affected people within our industry and further afield.
Yep, data, guys. It's the next big thing. If you don't know your data, then you're guessing. So, moving swiftly on, we had a bit of a different story next. Again, it was kind of one of mine. Ubisoft Dunoon, and do the 20 vacancies listed hint at Assassin's Creed Highlander. If you've not actually read the article yet, and I'm guessing that about 99% of the people who were commenting about this online didn't bother to read the article.
The headline.
Yeah, this was quite fun because a couple of people got in touch to say, hey, look, there's 20 jobs listed at Ubisoft in Dunoon, and pointed us towards a jobs board run, you know, by or on behalf of Ubisoft. And it listed a whole lot of roles, back-end programmers, network engineers, support staff and everything, for a studio listed as being in Dunoon in Scotland. Which was all very, very exciting until you clicked through and looked at the adverts and realised it's not Dunoon, it's Da Nang in Vietnam, a mere 8,000 miles away. You know, so easily commutable, should you be Iron Man or Elon Musk. Bit of a bugger for the rest of us, however. So I will admit I had a bit of fun with this and thought it was too good an opportunity not to mention it. The narrative designer and screenwriter Kim McCaskill had posted about her desire for an Assassin's Creed game based in Scotland a few weeks ago on Twitter. So I thought it's an opportunity too good to pass up. And wow, it's been storming the charts, and so many people sort of going, oh my god, this is great, I can't wait. And a lot of other people going, actually, no, it's never going to happen, you know. And then some people going, actually, if you click through, you'll find that the jobs are in Da Nang. And if they had read the article, they would realise that about 8 lines in, I said the very same thing.
Ironically, if they clicked through.
Quite so, yeah. You know, I even included a helpful Google map with the actual commute on foot, should you wish to sort of commute from Dunoon to Da Nang. But what can I say? It was a bit of fun. You know, we do good work. We do worthy and worthwhile things. But it was just too good an opportunity to pass up. So if you read it and you were outraged, or if you read it and you didn't click through and read the article, you have no one to blame but yourself.
I was just going to say that you're missing out on some cool research about previous Scottish connections in the Assassin's Creed lore as well, which were all new to me and I found fascinating. So you're missing out on that as well.
You see, this journalism thing, it was like 20 minutes to write the whole thing, 3 minutes on Google, and you just Assassin's Creed Scotland. And you know, it was like one of the Templars, Simon, whatever his name, came over and he hiked up Ben Nevis, to which I appended, it rained. Yeah, look, if you can't have fun in the games industry, you're doing it wrong.
Exactly that. You know, could we just quickly take a moment to acknowledge how brilliant either a Far Cry or Assassin's Creed game set in Scotland would be? Like, I want that. I want a Far Cry more. I want a Far Cry in the style of the one that just came, the one that came out, the most recent one, 5. I like the idea of that being like Wicker Man-esque, set like on the Scottish Islands, and I think it'd be great fun. You know, so Ubisoft, if you're listening to this and you've read our article, get on it. Yeah, right. Well, I actually heard from one contact who directly passed the article on to one of the executive team at Ubisoft down in Newcastle. So, yeah, I'm sure they'll be tuning in. I'm sure they will. But you know, let's be honest, guys. We need more video games set in Scotland. Full stop. You know, I can think of about 3. And we're just not seeing it. We're not seeing an awful lot of games. Okay, the wrinkles on your brow and the sort of far-off expressions. I'm trying to think of the 3.
So Forza Motorsport.
Okay.
because they've got a track in Edinburgh. Dear Esther,
of course.
and oh god,
I mean, I
I've just
guess you
tripped
could
myself up.
list all the FIFAs and golf games and but are sports games cheating? Because they're, let's face it,
totally cheating.
Yeah.
Well, St.
Totally
Andrews is kind of counts, I would say, in the golf games. Yeah, I don't know.
So we can take PGA Tour, all of them, but that's about it.
Golf games. Wow.
We're really
I
pushing
was
the
going
boat
to say Beeswing, Jack King Spooner. That's down near me.
Thank
my
you,
neck of the
thank
woods.
you. That was the one.
It's a real place. I've been there. I can confirm it.
Beeswing. Beeswing was the one I was thinking of. Thank you very much. It was brain freeze. It's my own fault. I have only had 7 coffees today, so I'm
Only
really
7. A journalist
not
that's
running at full capacity.
not at double figures yet. Jeez, that's unheard of.
Well, it is a Thursday. I'm trying to ease myself into the weekend. It's like, let's be honest, it's like either Assassin's Creed or Far Cry, or indeed Tomb Raider. I mean, we've got ancient stuff galore. You can't climb over a single sort of steep hill without running into a castle. The further north you go, we've got petrified forts, we've got Pictish stones. Lara, what are you all about? Get yourself up here before there's a hard border and you've got to apply for a visa. Come on.
Yeah,
Anyway.
I think that is a topic for another time. We should just do an episode where we just pitch installments in running franchises that could be set in Scotland.
I have video games that would benefit from an episode or a title set in Scotland. Ryan, you are on fire in terms of giving yourself work for the site these days.
That's exactly it. Actually,
we'll expect to see that out.
I've just thought of another game set in Scotland. Well, a mission set in Scotland. Uncharted 4 has a mission set in Scotland. And I can't remember what castle you're at, but you're at a castle, and if I'm honest, it's one of those situations where it could literally be anywhere. There's just some tall grass, and it's, rolling hills. But it's Scotland, so it's something. Okay,
I think we need to nip this in the bud now, because otherwise it's like it'll be 45 minutes later and we'll be going, actually, was one of the Lemmings levels? No, let's not. Let's save it for a nice big article on the site.
Definitely.
Oh god, I seem to have been really busy this week, because next up we've got
it seems so.
The second case study that we did in conjunction with the team at InGame, the innovation centre based in Dundee, which is a partnership between Abertay, Dundee and St Andrews universities. And so the tail end of 2020, we put together a whole lot of case studies looking at some of the innovative and pioneering work being done by games companies across the whole of the Dundee cluster. Last week, we wrote about Conglomerate Games and the work that they're doing with Project Physio, helping kids with cystic fibrosis to breathe more easily. And this week, it was Stormcloud Games and Nat West, who collaborated to produce the gorgeous little gem called Island Saver. Now it doesn't specify which island, so it could be Rassay, it could be Skye, it could be Arran. This could be a Scottish game that we don't yet know which island. But it's a really beautiful little game. AAA console title. It's out on all of the current generation, as well as iOS and Android, and it's a 3D tidy 'em up. So you belt about these islands, you find and recycle rubbish, and you get paid money. And you can save the money, and you can buy new gear and equipment. You get taxed on your money. And the whole point is to teach kids basic financial concepts and basic sort of monetary concepts, from opening a bank account through to loan sharking. And it's beautiful. It's really gorgeous. It's not an educational game. It's a game that happens to educate you. And it's a really wonderful example of how games, and in this case fintech, can work together to do something beyond the confines of mere entertainment. Absolutely wonderful. 2.6 million downloads and still going. And if you take a little look, if you plug Island Saver into YouTube, the number of streamers, the number of Let's Players, the number of people out there who are not in the 6 to 14-year-old target demographic who are playing and loving this game is amazing. Overwhelmingly positive reviews on Steam. It's just a thing of joy. So fair play to the guys at Stormcloud. Well done, Frank. Good work. And to Nat West, kudos for actually doing something positive and meaningful in the world of video games, which can be a frightening and sinister place for big grown-up corporations. So fair play to them both.
Yeah, and like
Absolutely.
it's just doing something that people have been sort of complaining about for years, that, you know, when you leave school and, you know, and kids just don't know anything about sort of the real world. You know, I can tell you Pythagoras theorem, but I couldn't tell you how to set up a bank account, and like that is like, you know, that's something that people have been complaining about for decades, and for them to gamify that and make it so it's really easily accessible, it's really cool. Yeah, I don't know what else to say other than it's cool and it's really important.
Well, as we saw from the Playaway Festival, you know, there are a lot of companies up here now who are building games, releasing games, focusing on mental health, well-being and education. And I think this is a great example. And the fact that it came out across all of the big consoles and proved to be such a big hit should be a real lesson for the big brands, the IP owners and the corporations out there who are looking for new ways to kind of engage with their audience. You know, it doesn't have to be about barrel-chested space marines and explosions. You can do something whimsical, wholesome and fun, and teach people, you know, valuable life lessons at the same time. Yeah, they released it free, which is not a small undertaking. You know, releasing a console game across PlayStation and Xbox and Switch and Steam, and then on iOS and Android is a big project. So again, you know, I think the bank have to be recognised and applauded for taking games seriously. Yeah, Island Saver is out now. You can track it down via the Scottish Games website, and we would highly recommend that you do.
Yeah, the only game that I can think of that sort of tries to teach you about finance is the sort of popular game anyway, is Animal Crossing, because of that man Tom Nook. And yeah, I think that's closest we get, is that loan shark.
Well, Island Saver does actually feature a loan shark who is like an 18-foot great white shark in a pork pie hat. So
subtle, I like it.
The tax bot. It's like you will never look at taxation the same way after this little egg-shaped robot in a bowler hat comes down and takes 10% of everything.
I reckon after my latest haircut, if I put on a bowler hat, I could cosplay it.
Well, I didn't want to say, but for those of you listening in audio only, without the benefits of full 4K stereoscopic virtual reality, Ryan's haircut is getting more and more serious.
Oh yeah. Yeah, no, I had to trim it recently, and I did something stupid. I opened I got the clippers out and looked at, I normally go for a 3, and it was getting to that sort of time of day where it's getting a little bit dark, but not you haven't closed the blinds and turned on the light yet. And I was just and I looked out the head for my clipper and was like, oh yeah, that says 3. You know, obviously took my glasses off because, you know, I need to cut my hair. Clipped on the thing and then started, and then the girlfriend goes, that looks a bit short. Are you sure that's a 3? And I was like, I'm pretty sure. Turned on the light and it was a 2, and I was like, you don't think a couple of millimeters is gonna, you know, change how you look, but apparently it does.
It could have been worse. It's like the Burstow look is coming back, you know, so I'm pretty sure the thug life thing.
I actually need to get into punk music.
A bit of oi.
No, I think you said it, man. I think it looks good.
Rocking it.
Yeah. Oh, you totally are. It's with the glasses and the headphones, you know. It's very, very.
Yeah.
It's working for you. Anyway, moving swiftly.
Certainly out of the Tintin ballpark now.
Yeah, that's it. You know, you can't call me Tintin anymore.
That is a very good. It's like, now, which character from the Tintin franchise do we look like? It's not Captain Haddock. It's not Snowy. It's.
I mean, I am as annoying as a wee yappy dog, to be fair. I'll give you that.
I couldn't possibly comment, Ryan. Couldn't possibly. I'll save it for the editorial extended version. But anyway, yes, moving swiftly on. Next we came to one of your stories, Ryan.
Yes.
So tell us about Stronghold Warlords.
Well, okay. Stronghold Warlords is a game that's came out. It came out on the 9th, so just a couple of days ago at the time of recording. And it's the latest installment in the Stronghold franchise, where essentially the main focus is to build a castle or stronghold, you know, and defend it while also attacking your enemies and stuff. So it's quite sort of Civilization, Total War kind of stuff, like real-time strategy, but with the added sort of base building element. And it's really cool. Like, I didn't really know much about the franchise because I'm not an RTS guy, and I don't really play on PC much either, and that's kind of where that genre lives primarily. So yeah, like I give it a wee look into, and the reason we looked into it was because it was brought to us by Firefly Studios, which have a base up in Aberdeen. So they're in Connecticut, London, and the glorious northeast of Scotland, the place I call home. So yeah, thought like a bit of hometown pride led me to writing up that. And the thing that's really cool about this one is they've moved from like European, like medieval history, and you're gonna be in Asia. So the campaign takes you from like Vietnam to China, to Japan, and you get to recreate various historical battles. And the big selling point with this installment that sort of changes it based on the other ones is you can come across warlords, which are historical figures from throughout history that if you recruit them into your army, they can give you additional perks or upgrades, and they give you extra resources. And so it's all about managing your warlords, as well as just, you know, how your civilization's coping and all that. Now that I'm thinking about it, I should have probably said it was more Age of Empires than Total War, but it's really cool, well worth checking out. And from what I've seen, so currently the reviews are mixed on Steam, but from all the reviews I've seen from the sort of big news publications that have had the game for a wee while, apparently that's like they're all predicting that that's going to move towards positive, because like at the start of the game you feel like it's quite limited, and the more you play it, the more it opens up and you sort of get a feel for the whole thing. So yeah, like anyone who's played it for a decent amount of time is praising it, and yeah, if it's your type of thing, definitely check it out.
Well, there's a whole lot of games out there, a whole lot of genres that don't, immediately reward you. I mean, you found the perfect example with Dwerk Saga a few weeks ago. It's not an immediate pick up and play mobile experience, 3-minute snacking kind of title. It takes time to get in there and sort of, as you say, sweep through the grasslands of the Mongol steppes. But I do have one question, Ryan, which is, how many boards could the Mongols hoard if the Mongol hordes got bored?
Did you want to show off that you could say that on radio or broadcast?
Yeah,
fair.
It was an absolutely shameless. It was just when you were talking, I thought, what was that? I'm sure it's from Calvin and Hobbes, and you should never need an excuse to quote Calvin and Hobbes. So forgive me, but I just thought I would ask in case it had come up in the course of you playing the game.
I don't think it has, not yet. But I mean, who knows? Like, that could be the big twist ending. Is how many could they hoard? That's the real question.
Yeah, that could be what changes your review from mixed to
positive.
Overwhelmingly positive.
Yeah,
is when people reach that part.
Well,
when they find out the answer finally.
It's great to hear that we have a studio up in Aberdeen. There seems to be quite a lot of activity going on up there for a city that was always so focused on one industry, on one particular sector. We are seeing more and more, developers, more studios, more sort of indies coming out of the city. So watch this space, because we hope to be able to do a quick roundup of some of the more interesting people up there in the near future. And indeed, would like to reach out to Firefly and see if they would... if they'll come and talk to us about the whole franchise at some point, because, a medieval siege 'em up sounds like the perfect sort of way that we could be spending. It's like the last remaining days of lockdown before we're all allowed out in the fresh air again.
Yeah, definitely. I was just thinking when we were speaking about games that reward like longer playtime. Another game that came out of Scotland that sort of suffered from that and eventually sort of made its name for it was Crackdown, because they found that when they were playtesting it, people who only got like a short amount of time with the game went, oh yeah, it's okay I suppose, but the people who played it for longer, or you dropped them in slightly further into the game where you did start getting like your superpowers and stuff, or like that sort of extra abilities, they really enjoyed it. So what they decided to do was they packaged the multiplayer for Halo 3 with every copy of Crackdown for the Xbox 360 and that's what led to its success. So yeah, there's definitely a market for games that, do force you to play for a wee bit longer before you sort of come across everything that it has to offer.
That's very, very true. Although, it's the mechanic in Metroid that always really, really hacked me off was, look, here's Samus. It's like, here's all the cool stuff you can do. You can do absolutely everything. And then there's a mysterious accident and they take all the cool shit away from you. And then you've got to go through and actually try and find it all. And all the time, in the back of my head, there's just that sort of an old man down bloody thing. It's, it's like if I was Samus Aran, I would have duct taped everything to my armor to stop it being ripped off in an accident / kidnapping /
just have
abduction
backups.
Incident.
Like, why doesn't she take backups with her? Just have your ship loaded with multiple of everything you need, and just drop ship it into the planet before you get some of it into the planet before you start coming down, just in case it's the ship that gets destroyed and makes you lose all your armor and stuff. Or, if it's the dropship that gets destroyed, you're fine. Your spaceship's full of the stuff you need.
You see, if only Nintendo had thought to come to us, they could have been so much more successful than they have been to date.
I mean, that's exactly it. It's not like the main selling point of the game is unlocking things as you go and slowly uncovering an alien planet or anything.
Yeah, let's just trash the entire progression system and in a completely uninformed and naive way.
Just head straight for the main boss.
Oh wait, hang on. Are we acting like the games media? Oh God, we are. We're acting like the games media. Right. Okay, I'm shutting this down and I'm shutting this down now. We're going to move swiftly on again. And Andrew, the last and possibly the juiciest story of the week. So tell us what's happening with GTA 5.
Yeah, so with GTA 5, we knew already that there was next-gen console versions coming. In fact, GTA 5 was the game that introduced the PlayStation 5 to the world. If you remember, the launch event for the PlayStation 5 actually opened with a trailer for GTA 5, and everyone was thinking, what's going on here? So at that time, they just announced that they were bringing it to PlayStation 5, but in a recent kind of investor kind of conference thing with the CEO of Take-Two, he essentially said that, these aren't going to be straightforward ports. They're going to be some sort of remaster. So some kind of version of the game made specifically for next-gen consoles rather than just, here's the game again, but now you can play it. You can play it over here. So it's exciting stuff, and it kind of raises a lot of questions. Number one, about what these versions of GTA will look like. And furthermore, Rockstar have got a big catalogue of stuff that lots of people would like to play. Be nice if that got remastered too. So I feel it's kind of sort of thing that's maybe opening the door to more, I would say. Yeah,
I'm seeing quite a few sort of things online where people are saying like the PlayStation 2 had 3 GTAs and this GTA has had 3 consoles. It's quite drastic,
Well, I think this is the way that the industry's going. If you've got a game that is so incredibly popular and you're producing new content for it, why would you not support the new consoles as they come out? But I think what we're going to do is we're going to drop into a more detailed discussion about this, because the whole notion of game preservation, game archiving, is something that came up at the Playaway Festival, and it's something we all kind of thought was really interesting and felt really strongly about. And we're going to be talking to Lauren, who was dealing with that whole issue and looking into that whole issue in the very near future. But it's like, let's talk about remasters. Let's talk about the video game sector. So the game sector, unlike music, film and literature, does not have a particularly long tail, by which I mean you cannot buy games that came out in 2007 or 1997. You can buy some games maybe as part of collections, and you can sure as hell find them online and download them and emulate them. But you can buy Pink Floyd's classic Dark Side of the Moon as easily now as you could back in the 1980s, 90s, early 2000s. You can go out and you can buy classic movies, Citizen Kane, you can buy Trainspotting, you can buy everything that Georges Méliès and the Lumiere brothers did, and DVD collections. All of these other industries, all of these other creative media preserve their history and make their history available to new generations. Whereas if you wanted to go and play and download Lemmings, the original Grand Theft Auto, Heads, Hired Guns, Walker, Blood Money, any of the games that were for platforms and technologies that don't exist anymore, that aren't sold, you can't. And so why is it that we're producing so much content, so many games which are so well loved that people are pouring hundreds, thousands of hours into, and they just kind of vanish? Bit of a strange one, no?
Yeah, no, it definitely is. The idea that game developers seem to be of a mindset of like, once they've released something, it's like, that's it, done that, been there, done that, that's that, finished. And, if someone wants to play it in 20 years, then, good luck. Try find a secondhand copy or emulate it or whatever. And I think that is changing a little bit now with, platforms like Steam and GOG. You are getting, like, games are sort of having a longevity, but that's only for PC gamers, really. In terms of, console gamers, if you're the type of person that buys, like, let's say the PlayStation 4 and now the PS5's coming out, you get rid of your PS4 and get a PS5. All the games that were on that console that aren't sort of being ported over, they kind of just disappear. And, obviously backwards compatibility changes that a wee bit, but it's not always the case. It doesn't always happen. Like this generation, famously, there was a lot of sort of booing and hissing at E3 when they announced that there wasn't any back compat for either of the consoles. It's quite strange that developers don't think, or publishers don't think, well, how do we keep people talking about these games? And like, how many times have you heard about a game that you've missed? That it's so difficult to get your hands on. I've actually got a wee list of like good examples and bad examples of reboots and remakes, and one of them is The World Ends With You, which was a wee sort of experimental JRPG made by Square Enix for the Nintendo DS. And I always wanted to play it. Like, I heard about it like a couple of years after it came out, and I always wanted to get a hold of it. But then, like, if you tried to find it, you could only find it secondhand, and it was going for about 50 quid. And I was like, 50 quid for like a game on the DS that I only kind of want to play? No, I'm alright. Like, I'm not willing to take that punt on it. But they've just remastered it for the Switch, and I got it around my birthday, and I'm willing to take the punt on a sort of brand new game for a new console. But going back to the DS and paying extortionate amounts for something that should have really been coming down in price, it just doesn't really make sense.
Well, it's
a difficult one. Sorry.
No, you go.
No, please go on.
No, you go.
No, you hang up.
So it's a great point, Brian. It's the sheer amount of stuff that's coming out now. You just can't keep track of absolutely everything. And it can be incredibly frustrating if you hear about a game and you come in sort of late in its lifespan, and you invest time, you invest money, and then the company basically shuts down the servers. It's happened to so many games in the last 10 years. But it's the developers, the publishers who are producing these games, they have costs as well. It takes money to run servers, it takes money to have support staff. And if you are producing, dozens if not hundreds of games every year, just the support costs can be endless. And this is a different discussion topic, but depending on how you monetize that game, if people bought it up front and there's no more revenue coming in, then there comes a point where it's costing you more than it made you to keep it going. But at the same time, there are a lot of examples out there of games which have been released into the community, as it were, and it's become a collaborative effort to keep them going. One of the games, a little bit like the one you mentioned, that came out the early 2000s was a game called NetStorm, and it combined the action real-time strategy of Command and Conquer with the shape sorting of Tetris. Let that sink in.
Sounds interesting.
You had floating islands, and you had to build a base and then collect resources, and the resources had to be connected to your main island by bridge pieces, which were basically tetrino shaped. It was gorgeous. It was a beautiful little thing. And I had sort of seen it and I could never find it, and eventually found it and installed it just in time for it to vanish into the greyware and the abandonware kind of side of things. And my disk corrupted, it just wouldn't load. And I was stuck with a game that I really enjoyed, but I couldn't play. And, I think it was Activision had moved on and had another several hundred games on the market at the time. So, we're not saying every game should be available all the time, always, forever and ever and ever, amen. But with the advent of the new streaming services, Stadia, PlayStation Now, Xbox Games Pass, more and more games are starting to become live services. And whether that's part of a subscription service, which we touched on, a while back on the podcast, whether it's, I tell a lie, that was in the Game Gurus column. I beg your pardon. Sorry, folks. It's, being a media mogul is not easy. We've got so much stuff going on that it's easy to lose track. But, it's something that could potentially be fixed. But that's kind of taking us away from the main topic, which was the remasters and the reboots. So, yeah. Andrew, in the piece that you wrote, you touched on a couple of the big franchises that Take-Two have run, where they've had a couple of different approaches. So take us through that, please.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing with remasters, is that it doesn't seem to be a kind of consistency across the board in terms of what it is we're talking about when we're talking about remasters. So Take-Two themselves, two recent examples from them are the BioShock trilogy, in which they've repackaged the first two BioShocks and Infinite as one collection for the new consoles. And more recently than that, they also did the same thing with the Mafia trilogy. But between those two projects, and also within those projects, they handle some of the games differently. So in the BioShock one, for instance, they haven't really done a whole lot. It's more just kind of making the games playable in their original state, but scaled up to the modern standard in terms of resolution, and also improving the frame rate a little bit, this kind of thing. Just kind of the sort of minimal level of polish. Whereas in the case with the Mafia trilogy, they completely remade the original Mafia from the ground up, new engine, new assets, basically built the game again from scratch. And then the second game in the trilogy is more along the kind of BioShock lines, except they've also put in new textures, new animations. They've kind of made some changes to the character models and stuff like that. So, there's various degrees of remaster, and we kind of see this across loads of different remasters that have happened recently. And it's kind of, I suppose, what is a remaster? What's a remaster? What's a remake? What's too far? What do we want, essentially? There's loads of interesting questions there, I think.
That kind of goes back to what Laura was saying at Playaway. Do you preserve a game in its initial state, like it's the same way it was released, or do you try to capture how it felt the first time you played it, by today's standards and all that, and try to, do you smooth out the textures in PS1 games so they look better on modern TVs, or do you keep it the way it did so CRT monitors would run it properly? It's quite an interesting topic, and I don't think it's something that other sectors have to worry about, especially not like music. Music, as long as it's been sort of preserved somewhere you can listen to it. I guess maybe the closest thing we can have is maybe film and the idea of colorizing black and white footage, but even then, there isn't really a precedent to do that. No one, I don't know anyone who's like, oh, Citizen Kane, let's get it colorized, So it's a very unique problem to the games industry.
There are a couple of in film and television. There are a couple of examples. I remember in Friends, when Friends became HD, there was that kind of people online talking about how now you can suddenly see parts of the set that you couldn't see before, bits of switches or things like that you weren't supposed to see, or people talking about how in films that use costumes and rubber special effects and stuff like that, suddenly you can see all the seams in the costumes that weren't possible before. And then there's also, I don't know if either of you have seen The Wire, but David Simon, the creator of The Wire, he had this big kind of thing for a long time where he said he only wanted The Wire to be in standard aspect ratio because that's how he envisioned it at the time, because he wanted it to look like the daily news people were seeing on their television. So I think those kind of questions definitely do exist in other mediums, but I think with games, maybe because you're jumping between consoles and things like that, and there's such huge leaps in the technology, that you're right that there are a whole lot more questions to talk about.
Just now that you've mentioned TV, I just remembered that when The Simpsons came over to Disney Plus, they changed it from standard to widescreen. But how they did that was they just sort of cropped it. So it meant that the top and the bottom of the screen wasn't...
Right.
The top and bottom of the frame wasn't really visible. And a lot of fans complained because The Simpsons is kind of known for a lot of its background jokes and wee things that are happening that you on a second or third watch of an episode you'll see it. And one that's a real standout that it totally killed a joke was there's an episode where Homer goes to the Duff Beer brewery and there's a pipe running along the top of the screen and there's 3 vats and it says Duff Light, Duff, and I can't remember what the third one is, but you can see that it's just one pipe feeding all 3 of them, and that whole joke just doesn't work because when they cropped it you couldn't see the pipe, so it was just Homer standing in front of 3 massive vats of beer that got different labels on it.
They're really, really interesting examples, and I think there's I guess again it's maybe a little closer to music than it is to TV, because with music you'll have the master tapes, and there are a lot of examples of musicians and producers going back and remastering some classic albums. Famously Jimmy Page went back through Zeppelin's entire back catalogue and kind of remastered it and brought it up to date with the latest technology. And in film you have, especially when you're shooting on digital, basically you've got the original, but what are you going to do with it? Is it different software? Can you run it through that? Whereas with games, it's not just the output. You should have the code, maybe not in every instance, but you should have the code there that actually makes it work. So do you start changing the code? Do you preserve it? Do you have, the original? Here is the artifact, the product that was released in X, but here's how we've actually changed it and updated it. And at what point does that stop being a remaster and become a reboot? I would argue that the more recent Tomb Raider games were a reboot. It reimagined the franchise from the beginning. It gave Lara a whole new backstory. It really gave her a different journey. Whereas with the GTA games, what we're talking about is a remaster. But potentially, if you start introducing, new abilities that appeared in some of the later games, it does become a bit of a reboot, or is it a remaster with bells on? And the Mafia example you gave, Andrew, is great because it's that attention to detail and it's that kind of sympathetic remastering, within the spirit of the original, but not just slapping a new coat of paint on it and shoving it out, but really producing something new that preserves the game and makes the game an entry point for people, or a way for people who only came in later in the series to really enjoy the early games that kind of established the franchise. So I can absolutely get it. And let's be honest, guys, there are a ton of games out there that we'd all probably love to play again, but that you can't access at the moment. So there's very clearly a market for this. I don't think the economic terms are going to be what drives this, because let's be honest, the games industry, not short of a bub or two. What was it, $174 billion the global games industry was worth in 2020. So I don't see EA, Activision, Blizzard, BioWare or anyone tripping over themselves to go, actually, you know what? We're missing this chunk of change that maybe doesn't equate to a whole lot. But I think in terms of an industry-driven initiative to preserve and to, I guess, find out what games people want. Because even within the Take-Two and Rockstar catalogue, there are a lot of games there that people would absolutely love to be able to play on their current devices.
I feel like Bully is one that keeps getting brought up time and time again.
Bully, yeah, that's definitely one I'd love to see. I was going to mention a game that Rockstar now own the rights to. I believe they published and made the last game in the franchise, but they didn't make the first two. But like I say, they still own the rights to, and that's Max Payne. I would love to see the first 2 Max Payne games on my PS4, potentially PS5, Xbox Series X. That'd be great. Like the idea of just playing those games that I've gotten so much enjoyment out of, over the years, but not having to, worry about digging out the PS2 and setting it up. Just it seems like a bit more of a rigmarole than like being able to just play it on the console that I've got hooked up at the moment, and that's just. Yeah, I'd love that. Like, Max Payne is definitely something that I'd want to see.
A good call. Sure. Andrew, any particular games or franchises you want to see brought back?
I think with all of this stuff, ideally you want both, right? Like, I think I love the idea, as you're saying, of like the remaster that brings in new people to something. But at the same time, it is also good to have access to as close to the original thing as possible as well. I think an interesting one, based on just pulling from something that we've talked about already today, I think that the very first Assassin's Creed at this point is maybe due a reassessment, because I remember it was kind of not so well received at the time, but just from a historical point of view, it would be so interesting to see kind of how that game fares today, because it's so different. The series has gone in such a different direction now. I think maybe early entries in series where probably the people who are playing the latest entries now haven't, they're so long that they haven't gone back to those originals to see what they're like. That's the stuff I think is interesting. The stuff that kind of gives you more context. That's the stuff I'm interested in most, I think.
Yeah, I think we've all been in a situation where you've joined a franchise or a series about halfway through, or you've picked up the latest installment, and then when you've went back to another game in it, the gameplay style feels totally different, or everything just feels a little bit more clunky. And I've mentioned Hitman quite a lot on the channel and in previous podcasts and stuff, and I do it's one of my favorite franchises. And I've been recently playing a lot of Blood Money again, and that's a game that I have well over 30 hours, 40 hours on Steam on it. I'd hate to think how much I've got on console combined. But after playing IO Interactive's recent series, and I think that I'm a massive fan of that. I think they've taken everything about the series that makes it Hitman and streamlined it and modernised it and made it just as good as it possibly can be today. Going back to play Blood Money, I find myself getting frustrated at it. Going, why can't I just do that? Why are you making me do this in a roundabout way where I could just do it in a button press in the latest game? Yeah, I think the idea of having almost two remasters is quite an interesting idea of this is what the original was and this is what it would be if we made it today, sort of thing. You've got to walk a fine line when remastering a game, because when does it become a reboot? Brian, you mentioned Lara Croft or Tomb Raider earlier, and they remade the first Tomb Raider from the PS1 on the 360 PS3 generation, and I think it was called Tomb Raider Anniversary. But even that added new things, and that sort of iconic bit where you fight the dinosaur, the big T-Rex. Yeah, it was a QuickTime event sequence. Well, that's not the same as what the original game was, so does that mean to say now it's a reboot instead of a remaster? Or is it just a remaster that's taking the game completely into the modern era, or at that point the modern era, and what was fashionable within video games at the time?
QuickTime events are always fun. Pressing X not to die is possibly the finest expression of video gaming mechanics that I think in this or any other period of history. God, I hate QuickTime events.
Yeah. I feel like
there's no excuse.
I feel like if you you make it part of the core gameplay loop, like the Telltale games, I can accept it. And I'm like, this game has been designed around its action sequences being QuickTime events, and I get that, and it's more of an interactive sort of animated film rather than an action title like Tomb Raider or whatever. The worst one is when it only happens every now and again, and it's in a cutscene. And so you'll put your controller down and you're I'm just going to watch this, I'm going to enjoy the story. Bang! Now you've got to watch the past 10 minutes of cutscene again.
Game designers, you're very welcome. It's and this is all valuable information that we're providing to you free.
Yeah,
so,
free.
No one's ever said any of this before.
Of course, this is completely new stuff. We're in uncharted waters.
You're going to be perplexed that you hadn't thought of this before, but it's always nice to hear it's three random yahoos on the internet offering opinions about how to make your games better.
I'm sure they really like it as well. They bet you they really appreciate it after spending hours and hours crafting a game and making it as good as they can be. Just 3 guys just saying, oh yeah, but you could have done this to make it better.
And specifically guys.
Yeah.
You know, we have become everything that we loathe and despise, gentlemen. So okay, we're going to stop there. But just before we do, I mean, nobody's asked me, but I think when it comes to remastering and rebooting, I think there's one game above all that we should all agree we need to see more of, and that people want to go back, and it's of course FIFA.
Oh yeah, of course, the original FIFA Soccer. Yes.
Yeah, because it's like we're losing what made it special, he says, as a man who's never played FIFA in his goddamn life.
Was FIFA Soccer the first one, or was that the PSP title that I used to play? I can't remember.
Hey, listen, let's bring back Actua Soccer from the team at Gremlin. It's if we want to get all nostalgic and misty-eyed about sports franchises, that's where we go. Actua Darts, Bosh. I don't even know why I said Bosh, but okay.
I think you've got a new catchphrase now. You've got to say Bosh after every point you make.
Yeah, I'll get sued by Jamie Oliver. I like Jamie Oliver, so I don't want to get sued by him. Mr. Oliver, please don't sue me. I don't have anything that you would like. Apart from my pizza dough recipe, sweet potato pizza dough. Call me Jamie, we can talk.
Give that away for free.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. I'll save that for the cooking podcast. But one of my favourite games of all time, possibly my favourite game of all time, is The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, the Infocom version. Mostly because it was co-created by Douglas Adams and is incredibly clever. So if you have watched the TV show, listened to the radio series, God help us, seen the movie or read the books, it doesn't help you. It uses all the same characters, but the narrative flow is completely different. It is fascinating, it is astonishing, it is bloody difficult. And for its 30th anniversary, the BBC released an online version, which is the same game, but it brings in sort of graphics, and it brings in a slightly more pleasant user interface. And you can still find it now. We'll include it in the show notes, but it's up on the BBC website. And if you've never played The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, it's just the best thing ever.
You mentioned that it was difficult there. Isn't there a point in it where if you didn't pick something up right at the very start of the game, a couple of hours later, you can fail?
No. It's about 28 moves in. You can fail to do something. And if you fail to do it, then 6,000 moves later, you can't finish the game. So, it was a bugger. It was. But you know what? That's why it took me 6 years to complete.
Well, that's I don't think game design... there's definitely... game designers don't really have that sort of... they don't... I don't think they'd get away with that nowadays. And I think there is sort of... Yeah, I don't think there's I think there's a precedent of I paid 50 quid for this game. I'm entitled to see the end of it, and I get that, and I think that's why a lot of people criticize Dark Souls and stuff. It's I've spent a lot of money on this, and there's no way for me to see the end of it if I'm just bad at it. But that's just how games were at one point. How many SNES games have you actually finished?
Yeah, well, it's the last data I saw suggested that something like 80% of all video games are never finished because somebody will hit that point of frustration, and there's always something new on the horizon, which again, plays into the whole, do we need more old games on the market? But there's a discussion to be had about the whole difficulty curve and why designers and developers insist on including a difficulty curve at all, or why in some cases it's so fucking steep as to be vertical, because it does put a lot of players off, and if you're not the hardest of the hardcore and you can't spend 14 hours a day in front of your TV or on your PC, the chances of you getting through it are slim to none. I will put my hand up and say I tried the original Dark Souls for about 2 hours and then just went, I have other things in my life. I have alcohol and children and walks in the fresh air and books and this is what people who can devote, not necessarily, and it depends on what the books are and what alcohol you have, but it's clearly aimed at an audience that is not me.
I found that I took an awful long time to actually like Dark Souls, and it wasn't until I give Bloodborne a chance that I went back and actually enjoyed them. I think I've mentioned that Dark Souls 2 I played a bit and enjoyed it. then went and played Bloodborne, loved it, and then went back and played Dark Souls 2, then 1. But the first time I played Dark Souls 2, I got to a boss and was just like, nah. Like it was the second boss in, third boss in or something, and I was like, this is, taking the Michael. Like, I'm just not doing it.
Absolutely. And this is why I'll be absolutely honest, I spend so much time, of the small amount of time I do spend gaming, more and more of it I'm finding that I spend on my mobile. I worked in mobile games since 2000, 8 years before the App Store came out, and I am not one of these people who you will hear going, but mobile gaming is killing the industry and mobile games suck. That's like saying Switch games suck. You can't write off a platform because you personally don't like any of the stuff that you have played. It makes no sense whatsoever. But there's very clearly a very broad audience. There are more people playing games now than have ever played games in the past, which has to be good for the industry because it means that there are more developers producing more games and making more money.
It also just normalizes playing video games, and it sort of goes against that stereotype of people who play video games after their children are 30-something-year-old white guys sitting in a basement that never leave the house. And the more people that play video games, it sort of fights that stigma.
Well, hallelujah, and testify, because in the week when we celebrated International Women's Day, I think the need for diversity and inclusion and more, a much broader range of voices when it comes to video games, not just in terms of developing and designing them, but in terms of representation within them. We see an awful lot more barrel-chested green guys with bug eyes in video games than we do female characters. So we just need to get a bit better at this, let's be honest. Anyway, we seem to have strayed from the topic.
Yeah, quite again. Considerably.
Remasters, reboots. Anything else to add, gentlemen?
No, not really. I think we're posing a question this week more than anything, and that's, please feel free to get in touch with us on Twitter or, through the Facebook or wherever you feel like contacting us, and let us know what you think is the line between a reboot and a remaster, because for some people it will be, you've changed the odd thing, and some people it's, oh no, you've got to properly overhaul it and change everything. And when Oddworld, Abe's Odyssey came out, they changed where some of the collectibles were. And some people, die-hard fans were like, this just feels wrong, it doesn't feel right, because they've been playing the game for years and they knew how to 100% on their first run. And so it's it would be interesting to see where other people stand on the debate. Or, I don't know if it's a debate, but definitely the question.
Well, here's, 3 words in the whole reboot remaster question, okay? Mass Effect 3.
Oh, what would you do with it?
Well, it's a question. If you were going to reboot or remaster the series for the next generation of consoles,
well, it is getting
take into account, So what would you do with the end of that last game? The one that made people so cross.
Yeah, but then
would you rewrite the end of Jane Eyre? That's a book for everybody listening who's under the age of 50.
But that's the thing, do you reckon you'd get just as much backlash for changing the end to Mass Effect 3 as you would be for leaving it? Or for what it was to start with, at least? When Mass Effect 3 first came out and people got to the end of it, they were raging that, all their decisions, if it essentially came down to what colour a laser happened at the end of the game. And
could you have prefaced that with spoiler, please?
Oh, sorry. But that's I didn't tell you what the laser did. But do you? I think BioWare is in an interesting kind of situation here. Do they go and rewrite it and potentially anger their fan base even further, or do they just release it and say, we've preserved it exactly how it was, we just brought it up to date? It's interesting.
Well, I think in that case, I think it's more interesting to do both. Again, if you're going to rewrite the ending, do it in a way that is that is deliberately designed to play upon your expectations of the thing as it was, right? like Brian was talking about Twin Peaks earlier on. Like that's a good example, like of an ending that wasn't necessarily very well received across the board or confused people. Just make it worse by putting out a prologue that changes the story a little bit, and then making another series that also kind of changes things. Or like with the I don't know if you know much, if you're much of an anime person, but the series Evangelion, like they've been like remaking the entire thing, and it's like entirely different, like parallel worlds, different characters, like all of this stuff. Like I think that stuff is so cool. So like there's that whole possibility as well.
Yeah. Tell us what you think in the comments of the YouTube, Twitter, and all that. Like I said earlier, like especially about Mass Effect. Like Brian, that's a hell of a question. Like I'm worried. I'm not worried. I'm debating in my head what's the better option. Maybe it's a question right at the start of the game saying, would you like the reimagined ending or the original? And they just do both, try to please everyone. But yeah, then they still run the risk of people being like, this is just as bad as the original. So who knows?
Well, let's be honest, guys, right? Making gamers unhappy is essentially, if you listen to the people on YouTube, what developers and publishers set out to do.
Oh yeah, 100%.
So regardless of what you choose, you're going to have somebody online who's unhappy. The question is, do we value artistic integrity? Do we cater to the complex demands of our audience and make them part of the future developments of a franchise that they know, that they love, that they've maybe spent thousands of hours within? Or do we preserve the original but then take this forward? I mean, if you look at Star Wars, very few people thought that George Lucas's ongoing tinkering added anything particularly.
It definitely didn't.
Like, George, step away from the CGI.
I remember watching the version of A New Hope where he added in Jabba, and I think I can't remember who I watched it with, and I think they'd seen that version but never sort of properly paid attention to it or thought about it. And I sort of like, because we were rewatching it, you can sort of pause and go back and all that. I told them to watch Han Solo as he walked around Jabba, and how they've sort of made him all janky and clip up and down and stuff. And yeah, like why did he do that?
Because it's his game, it was his studio, and he fucking could. Let's be honest, that's pretty much all the reason that he needed. But what I'm trying to say is, where do you draw the line? Let's be honest, you can tinker, you can refine, you can change, you can update to your heart's content. The reason that so many video games come out late is because of feature creep, which is, we could do this, and actually that would make it better, so we'll just jab this in. Or as you develop, as you create the thing, new opportunities come up, or new technology or new techniques mean that you can do more, and you go, we'll just add this in. So taking something like Hitman or one of the earlier Far Cry games and bringing it up to date, there would be so much that you could do that it would be almost inhuman to not allow the developers, the designers, especially if it's their original designers and developers, to realize their vision. There's a really great example again on YouTube where somebody has taken the original Grand Theft Auto and the city maps, but done it in a proper 3D engine, so you can spin around and zoom it. Now that's what we would have done if we could have in like 1996, but we couldn't because the technology just wasn't up to it. So I think there's a lot of room for a homage, and there's a lot of room where you can let your players have fun with this. Again, look at ModDB in the modding community, Black Mesa, which realizes the whole of Half-Life, scene by scene, shot for shot, but in the Half-Life 2 engine, is a thing of beauty. It's absolutely lovely, and Valve were never going to do it, but they let that happen. And I guess it comes down to the publishers, the IP owners, and I would like to imagine that many of them have big plans and a long-term plan for preserving our digital heritage and doing all of this. But yeah, maybe the gaming community need to get out there more and say, please let us do something with this.
Do you mind if I just ask you, Brian, how did you find watching that video of someone recreating the original Grand Theft Auto in 3D? Because, if that, that's kind of what you guys wanted to do back in the day. Like, did it feel almost like that was that exactly how your vision was, like your guys' vision was, or did they?
It was sacrilege. I wanted to hunt down the person and crucify them on the halfway line at Wembley. No, absolutely not. Okay, one, the game came out a long time ago, and two, it's this whole, it kind of goes back into the notion of user-generated content. If your hardest core fans want to take what you made and reimagine it or do something with it, my opinion, and this is just my personal opinion, is let them. Way back in, so the original Grand Theft Auto came out in 1997. Around the midpoint of 1998, we started getting contacted by people who were setting up what they were calling websites, this being the early days of the internet, and saying, hey, we love the game, we're starting a website all about it, can you help us? And I remember, being the PR guy, I went and spoke to the team and said, can we put together a little pack of like textures and models and stuff from in the game and send it to them, and that way they can make the website look like the game. And this was all new, and so we did. And so I think there were 4 or 5, maybe half a dozen people out there building GTA fan sites that we sent texture packs to, and that we sent in-game content to, and they started building their own tools. And pretty soon the tools that they were using, they could reskin their own cars, they could build their own maps, they could do their own missions. And so they started modding the game, like way before the concept of game modding had come out. I think Quake had just been released with its engine, but we didn't have a mod community. It wasn't a common thing that you'd find within video games. But as far as we were concerned, it's the developers and the sort of team behind it. It was go nuts, guys. It's great. You're not harming us. You're not.
Yeah.
Harming
there's
the
nothing
game.
you can do that can affect the product that we released. So go for it.
Yeah. It gives your hardest core fans, it gives people who love the content that you've created, a different way to engage and a different way to sort of pay homage. But then again, once you go down that route, you no longer have control necessarily over the content that your fans produce. If you look at the world of fan fiction, there are some authors out there who are great, go nuts, just don't show me the really freaky stuff. And there are some people who are like, no, I've got a photocopier full of cease and desist letters, and it's one is coming your way. And it's up to the author, to choose their sort of point of participation and their level of comfort. I think there are a few people out there who have got really successful franchises under their belts, who have said, as long as it's not featuring illegal stuff, then go nuts. Let's look at Harry Potter. J.K. Rowling has written less than 1% of all the Harry Potter fiction in the world, because so many people out there are writing the same kind of thing. So it becomes an informed decision for developers whether or not you want to allow your fans to pick up what you've made and take it in different directions.
Yeah, while we're on the topic of that, like I always kind of respected Toby Fox, the guy behind Undertale, and what he did with that, especially in regard to the sort of less savoury stuff that you alluded to. The idea that what he said was, if you were gonna make that stuff that's not safe for work and all that, list it under, I think it was Undertale, but spell tail as if it's Tail instead of Tale. So it means that if you were wanting to find that sort of stuff, you can. But if you are someone that's just wanting to read up on like fan theories or whatever, you're not going to come across that. And I always thought that was a really clever way for him to say to his community, you can do what you want, express yourself within this fictional universe, but don't interfere with other people's fun. Don't push it on them if you don't want to do that. And I always thought that was a really clever and quite accepting way to do things.
And this is the thing, we've got some wonderful examples of a community pulling together and appreciating and liking the content and being far more collaborative and friendly. But, you know, for every one of those, we've got probably 2 counter examples of people being horrible and tearing each other to shreds and you know, causing problems for the creator or indeed the IP holder. But anyway, I think that we're drifting off into another
topic for another
content, which it definitely should be, absolutely should be. So let's wrap up for this week, folks. Do we want to spotlight anyone this week? Is there anyone out there that you think is worthy of a big shout out from the SGN podcast team?
Do you know, I kind of want to just circle back around to Island Saver. Yeah, like, it's such a worthwhile and incredible idea. Like, yeah, just check it out. Like, if, like, you know, we don't need to cover it too much because that's kind of what we did earlier. But yeah, like, I feel like sort of just bringing it up again at the end. Like, it's such an important thing to say we're going to teach people how to sort of have everyday skills, but we're going to do it in a way that's more enjoyable than just, you know, here's a lecture on banking. So yeah, like, definitely, it's just Island Saver, 100%.
It's a phenomenal example of how you can, you know, use the engagement that games are so good at to educate people. You know, and this is something that we should, as a nation, as an industry, we should be doing more of. You know, we should be reaching out to try and take education forward. We know that kids engage with video games more than almost any other content type out there. But the number of examples of games being used in classrooms is not great. So, yeah, it's like, ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for Frank Arnott and the team at Stormcloud and the team at NatWest, because they have really produced something quite special. And it's a really wonderful example that we should be ramming down people's throats and saying, see what we can do when we try. So thanks, Ryan, great call, and we'll put links to all of the people we've been talking to and talking about in the show notes for this week's episode. So that brings us to the end of another week's Scottish Games Network podcast. And I don't know, I feel we're getting slicker and far more professional with this, guys. What do you think?
You still haven't listened to last week's episode, Brian.
Sure.
I'm ever so slightly frightened.
Yeah, no, but I think we are. You know, practice makes perfect at the end of the day.
Well, ever since we found out that after the Playway party that Andrew has set up an OnlyFans page, I'm just not entirely sure what to do with this.
Yeah, I mean, only the premium content goes up there.
You gotta make it work somehow, you know?
SoundCloud or Bandcamp I could have got on board with, Andrew, but, you know, but this is what
go direct.
You can't judge the platform by the content that you've accessed. Okay, moving swiftly on. Thank you very much indeed, ladies and gentlemen. It's been a pleasure as always. We hope you've learned something new. Please do keep the conversation and discussion going. We're not hard to track down. The Scottish Games Network is available across all popular social media channels and Facebook. So, you know, let us know what you think. Do you want to hear more of this? Do you want less of this? Tell us what your favourite games are that you would like to see rebooted or indeed remastered. And if you think we're talking mince, you can tell us that too. We're always happy to hear from you lovely, lovely people. So until next week, I've been Brian.
I've been Ryan.
And I've been Andrew.
That's it, guys. Peace out.
All right, catch you later.